Greetings, Crypt Keepers. As promised, this is the El Cucuy bonus episode. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button so you'll be notified every time there's a new episode of Cryptique. Tell all your friends, ghouls, goblins, and monsters about your favorite podcast on the paranormal, hidden history, forbidden knowledge, conspiracy theories, and folklore. You can email us at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com to make a show suggestion, and you will receive a shout-out on the show. This is the Mask of El Cucuy, and this is Cryptique. Santa Fe, New Mexico, 1988. A girl we'll call Adriana remembers growing up on an old ranch. One night, as she's drifting off to sleep, the record player turns on and plays a creepy old melody she doesn't recognize. The door slowly creaks open on its own. Adriana is terrified. She's only 5 after all. We've all had experiences like that when we were kids. She pulls the cover up over her face and struggles not to breathe so no one will notice her. She feels eyes on her, seemingly searing her skin so that she can no longer remain hidden. She tears the covers off and is faced with a giant white face with black holes where the eyes and mouth should be. She feels the air sucked out of her lungs like a vacuum. She feels her heart start racing, and adrenaline fills the little girl's body, but she is frozen in fear. Her brother Manny cracks up laughing as he removes the mask, but Adriana is furious. Adriana describes Manny as more sadistic than most brothers. He got pleasure from the suffering of others. Adriana isn't the only one who's furious. Her father walks in angrily and yells at Manny. Her mother walks in soon after to comfort her. Adriana says Manny wasn't happy unless she was crying. The next day, Manny tells Adriana she shouldn't worry about him. She should worry about El Cucuy. Manny describes El Cucuy as the boogeyman, only a woman, old and decrepit, with twisted joints and black holes where her eyes should be. She goes from rooftop to rooftop and eats children who don't behave. Trust me, he says, you'll see her soon enough. After that, Adriana was in a perpetual state of fear, growing more and more anxious with each little creak the house makes. She says she ended up sleeping in her parents' room almost every night, but her father had had enough. He splashes Manny with water and says, "Every night your sister wakes me up because of El Cucuy, you get to wake up too." Manny, not wanting to be rudely awoken every night, tells his sister he got the mask because he was afraid of El Cucuy, and when he put the mask on, it scared her, and she never came back. He gives his sister the mask so she too can scare El Cucuy. Keep it by your bed, and if you're scared, put it on, and she'll never bother you again. Adriana's father agrees, and she believes her father wouldn't lie to her, so she feels a little bit safer. Every time she's scared at night, she puts the mask on. One night, through the tiny eye slits in the mask, she swears she sees the twisted legs of a woman standing at her bedroom door. Her facial features are gnarled and her skin is scarred. But when she takes the mask off, there's nothing there. Had she scared El Cucuy away with the magic mask? Time went on, and she never saw the wretched old lady again. Still, Adriana couldn't wait to get out of that house. Jump ahead 18 years to Los Angeles, California. She followed the love of her life to the big city, but Adriana finds herself a single mother with her own son to raise. She's soon drowning in debt, and the outlook is bleak. Eventually, she gets news that her parents are moving from that old ranch to Florida. They make an offer for her to come live at the ranch rent-free. Just then, a flower pot falls off the table and crashes to the floor, shattering into pieces. Adriana writes it off as a tremor from an earthquake. She thinks moving to New Mexico might give her the chance to get ahead financially and agrees to move back to the ranch that haunted her as a child. Her parents had sold all of the livestock, save for one old blind horse. The ranch was in disarray when she and her son Daniel arrived. The inside looked like her parents had taken nothing but the clothes on their backs. The old ranch decor was still up. Cattle horns, horseshoes, dream catchers, the type of Southwest decor one would expect to find inside a ranch house. Even the old record player that played haunting melodies that had spooked Adriana as a child was sitting, dusty, on an end table. The old house brought up mixed memories she had of childhood. She was soon hired at a big box store, making double what she'd been scratching by on in L.A. Things were looking good, she thought. But things soon took a dark turn. Daniel, her son, crawled into bed with her for the third night in a row, and Adriana told him, "You've got to get used to your own room." She was shocked when her son whispered, "There's a woman in my room." All of the dread and panic Adriana had felt as a child in that house came rushing back and overwhelmed her all at once. Was it the same twisted woman Adriana remembered from her past? Adriana tells her son to wait there and grabs a fireplace poker to check the boy's room. Slowly, she whips open the door. It's empty. Let's take a quick break to get a word from our sponsors. Hey Cryptique fans, be sure to check out my co-host Ryan's other podcast, Movie Howl, where he and his buddy Joe review movies past and present and could help you find your next favorite movie. Also, don't forget to check out my other podcast, Exploring Evil, where I tell stories of lesser-known serial killers, and some even have a paranormal twist. You can find both podcasts everywhere you find Cryptique. Now back to Cryptique. Adriana summed up the boy's fear to the house making noises. She called her mother for advice, and her mother reminded Adriana what helped her when she was a child. She told her to check an old box of her childhood belongings that were left at the house. That night, under some dolls, in a dirty old box, Adriana finds the Cucuy mask. Then, the same haunting melody starts playing on a record player. She calmed herself by reasoning that her son Daniel must have turned the record player on, but didn't want to ask him for fear of scaring him. She turned off the record and let it go, apprehension still mingling with her soul. That night, Adriana gave Daniel the haunted old mask and told him the same story she was told as a child. Wear this mask and it will scare off anything that's bothering you. Adriana realized that she had never told Daniel about El Cucuy and wondered why he was seeing the same frightening, gnarled-up old woman she had seen as a child. That night, Adriana again awoke to see a huge white face with black holes where the eyes and mouth should be. She screamed, but then she realized it was her son wearing the mask. It brought back a painful memory for her. Daniel whispered, "The mask doesn't work." She then noticed deep scratches, gouges, on her son's arm. She asked him what happened. He again whispered, "Why am I bleeding?" Just then, the haunted old melody again filled the stale air in the old ranch home. "Stay here," she told Daniel, and he whispered back, "Take the mask." She thought about calling the police, but thought it would sound silly to tell them a Mexican folklore creature was playing music in her house. She picked up a golf club and turned on the hall light. She crept, slowly and silently, with the exception of a couple creaks of the house under her feet. She walked into the living room and noticed the needle wasn't on the spinning record, but it was still playing. She unplugged the turntable. She turned to go back to the bedroom, and the music started over. Petrified, she turned around slowly and saw a mangled old lady with her yellow, crooked fingernail on the record as the music started up again. She was wearing the same El Cucuy mask the family thought would protect them from her. It seemed like the music was coming out of the mouth of the mask as she realized there were no speakers hooked up to the old turntable. Terrified, Adriana ran back to the bedroom to get Daniel. She knew it wasn't her imagination. She and Daniel fled the house immediately, tires kicking up gravel in the long, desolate driveway. Adriana called her mother and father and told them she had seen El Cucuy with her own eyes. Her father responded in Spanish, "You must have seen the ghost lady." Adriana replied angrily, "What the hell are you talking about?" Her father said that the record player would sometimes start on its own, and they just assumed it was Adriana's ghost lady. Her father said, "You've always had an overactive imagination, sweetie. She's harmless." She screamed back, "It scratched Daniel." She sped through the chilly Santa Fe night in disbelief of the fact that her parents didn't believe her, even though they'd had experiences in the house as well. Adriana and Daniel slept in the car that night, and she recalls that they had nowhere to go besides the ranch. By now, Adriana was desperate and paid a psychic to investigate the house. The psychic told Adriana that it was a female spirit, the strongest she'd ever felt, and that it was, quote, overwhelming. She said she didn't know who the spirit was, but said an item in the house belonged to her son, and she wanted it back. The psychic asked Adriana if her son had a toy or something he was playing with. Adriana thought briefly and said, "All his toys were brought here from L.A." The psychic got a strange feeling. The psychic and Adriana laid eyes on the mask that had been left on the floor from the night before. It hit Adriana like a ton of bricks. She didn't start seeing El Cucuy until her brother had brought the mask into the old house. Maybe, she thought, the mask didn't keep her away, but had kept her in the house for the last 23 years. She visited her brother, whom she blamed for all of the mayhem in her life at the ranch, who lived a couple of hours away, to investigate the origin of the mask. He told Adriana he got the mask at a yard sale. No, an estate sale. When someone dies and they sell all of their stuff, he said. He recalled that he needed to get something for his mom's birthday, but there was nothing. The old mask was out of place, Manny had thought to himself at the time. The man running the sale told Manny that the lady and her child had died in a fire. He said he bought the mask for $1. Adriana flashed back to the psychic, telling her something that belonged to the spirit's son was in the house, and she wanted it back. He said he bought it because he was, quote, into all that morbid stuff, but Adriana knew the real reason was so that he could torment her with it. She left the mask with Manny. She says she'll never know for sure what the woman wanted from them. After that, Adriana and Daniel never saw the old lady at the ranch again. Her brother burned the mask because he said it gave him nightmares. And that's where the story ends, Crypt Keepers. I hope you enjoyed tonight's bonus content. Don't forget to rate and comment on the show. Also check out Movie Howl and Exploring Evil on your favorite podcast platform. Don't buy haunted objects and have a great night. We'll see you next time on Cryptique.